April 18th, 1942. American bombers suddenly appeared in the skies above Tokyo. It defied logic. It defied all military calculations. That was the immediate reaction among Japan's highest-ranking officers. The United States, they believed, had no airfields near enough to launch such an attack. Their aircraft carriers were far too small to support heavy land-based bombers like the B-25. And yet, there they were, 16 of them slicing through the air over the Japanese capital, dropping their payloads on industrial zones, fuel depots, and even areas dangerously close to the imperial residence. The alarms shattered the midday calm, blaring across the city as officers scrambled to their posts, staring upward in disbelief. How could this be happening? Every expert, every strategic assessment had declared it impossible. The United States lacked bases within a 2,000-mile radius. No carrier in the world could launch a medium bomber the size and weight of a B-25. The Pacific Ocean, vast and unbroken, was supposed to be Japan's impenetrable shield. But now, smoke curled into the sky from factories and refineries, and the unthinkable had become reality. American warplanes had struck the heart of the empire. Within the hour, an emergency council was convened. Japan's most senior military leaders hurried to the war room, their faces etched with tension. Admiral Yamamoto was the first to arrive. His expression was ashen, his usual calm replaced by a rare sense of dread. What he would say in this meeting would alter the course of the war. But first, they had to confront the truth. They had been wrong, terribly, dangerously wrong. The room fell into silence as Yamamoto took his seat. One by one, admirals and generals filed in, filling the space with quiet urgency. The walls were covered in maps and charts, diagrams of victories across the Pacific, from Pearl Harbor to the Philippines, Singapore to Java. But today, those victories felt distant, almost irrelevant. General Sugiyama was the first to speak, his voice trembling just enough to betray his unease. "How did they get here?" he asked. "How did American bombers reach Tokyo?" No one had a clear answer. Intelligence officers pored over intercepted messages, radio operators strained to catch any transmission, but the mechanics of the operation remained a mystery. The physical damage was, in military terms, limited around 50 civilians killed, several buildings damaged. Compared to the devastation Japan had inflicted at Pearl Harbor, the destruction was negligible. But that was not the point. The true impact was not measured in rubble or casualties. It was measured in the collapse of a belief. The belief that the Japanese homeland was untouchable, sacred, protected by the vastness of the Pacific. And now, that belief had been shattered. The emperor himself, Hirohito, demanded answers. His military leaders had sworn absolute security over the imperial capital. That promise had just been broken. Yamamoto rose slowly, his movements deliberate. He approached the largest map on the wall, his finger tracing a line across the Pacific, stopping at a point roughly 600 miles east of Japan. "Gentlemen," he began, "they launched from aircraft carriers." The room exploded in protest. "Impossible," they said. "B-25 seconds cannot take off from carrier decks." But Yamamoto silenced them with a calm, unshakable tone. "They did," he said, "and that changes everything." He had studied in the United States, lived among Americans, understood their industrial might and their stubborn resolve. Before the war, he had warned his superiors, "I can guarantee success for 6 months, perhaps a year. After that, I cannot answer for the outcome." Now, just 5 months after Pearl Harbor, the Americans had already retaliated, and not just with a token strike, with a bold, unprecedented operation that defied every rule of naval aviation. But what truly unsettled Yamamoto was not the mechanics of the raid. It was the message it carried. "This attack proves something," he said, his voice low but carrying through the silent room. "It proves something about American psychology." He paused, letting the weight settle. "They will never surrender. No matter how hopeless it seems, they will always find a way to strike back." Still, his greatest concern was not the immediate attack, but the strategic implications that followed. Another admiral questioned the urgency. "The damage is minimal. Why are we panicking?" Yamamoto turned from the map, his gaze sweeping the room. "It is not about the damage," he said slowly, as if explaining a fundamental truth to children. "Our entire defensive doctrine was built on distance on the ocean as a barrier, on our people's faith in their safety. Now, that faith is broken. He explained further. The sight of American planes over Tokyo, the sound of bombs falling, the flames rising near the palace, all of it would shake public confidence. Citizens would demand protection. Fighters would have to be withdrawn from the front lines to defend the homeland. Resources would be pulled from offensive campaigns to shore up defenses, all because of 16 bombers that, in material terms, had done little harm. The psychological wound, however, was deep and spreading. Then came another revelation, one that sent a chill through the room. Intelligence had just confirmed the bombers did not return to American bases. Instead, they flew west toward China. They were never meant to come back. They knew it was a one-way mission, Yamamoto said, his voice dropping. And they came anyway. That single fact revealed a terrifying truth. The Americans were willing to sacrifice everything to prove a point. Later that day, Yamamoto was summoned to the imperial palace. He entered a private chamber where Emperor Hirohito waited, seated in solemn silence. The emperor rarely addressed military leaders directly. His presence here signaled the gravity of the situation. "Explain to me," the emperor said, his voice quiet but firm, "how enemy aircraft bombed my capital." Yamamoto bowed deeply, his forehead nearly touching the floor. "Your Majesty," he replied, "the Americans used modified bombers launched from carriers far beyond our usual patrol range." Then came the question no one wanted to hear. And our defenses? The Empire had spent enormous sums on radar installations, fighter patrols, coastal batteries, and naval picket lines. All of it had failed. Yamamoto hesitated, then answered with painful honesty. "Our patrol boats were stationed too close to shore. The carriers remained just outside our detection range." The Emperor's face remained impassive, but his next question cut through the air like a blade. "Can they do this again?" A silence fell thick, heavy, suffocating. Yamamoto took a breath. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said at last. "Unless we take decisive action." The Emperor asked what that action would be. Yamamoto inhaled deeply. What he was about to propose would reshape the entire war effort. It was bold, dangerous, and potentially disastrous, but he saw no alternative. "We must expand our defensive perimeter," he said. "Push it 1,000 miles further east. We must capture Midway Island. It is the key to controlling the Central Pacific. If we hold Midway, American carriers will not be able to approach within striking distance of Japan." The Emperor listened without interruption, his expression unreadable. Then, with a single word, he sealed Japan's fate. "Do it." Yamamoto left the palace with orders to plan the Midway operation, a massive naval offensive, the largest fleet Japan had ever assembled. But there was a flaw in the plan, one Yamamoto did not yet know about. American codebreakers had already deciphered Japan's naval codes. For weeks, they had been reading every message, every order, every movement. When Yamamoto began drafting the Midway attack, the Americans were already aware. They were not just preparing to defend, they were setting a trap. Back in Tokyo, however, the focus had shifted to the aftermath. In the weeks following the raid, Japan's high command made a series of critical miscalculations, each rooted in fear, pride, and denial. They refused to accept that the United States could sustain a sustained bombing campaign. They got lucky once, some generals insisted. They bolstered homeland defenses, but at the cost of weakening their Pacific positions. They rushed the Midway operation, skipping careful planning, driven by urgency rather than strategy. They underestimated the enemy's resolve, their innovation, their willingness to take risks. All of it stemmed from that single raid, 16 bombers, 8 minutes of bombing, minimal physical damage. But Admiral Yamamoto understood what others did not. This was not about destruction. It was a message, a declaration. "We are coming for you. No distance is too great, no obstacle too hard. We will find a way." That message terrified him, not because of the bombs, but because of what it revealed about American character. He had seen their factories, their shipyards, their endless capacity to build and rebuild. And he knew something else, something he had never shared openly with his peers. Since December 7th, 1941, he had carried a private dread, a prediction he had confided only to a close friend in a sealed letter. "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." The Tokyo raid proved him right. The giant was awake, and it was angry. Japan had won the first 6 months of the war, just as Yamamoto had predicted Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore. But the tide was already turning. The raid on Tokyo was the first sign. 6 weeks later came Midway, Japan's first major defeat. With 4 aircraft carriers lost in a single battle, the backbone of its naval power shattered forever. After that, the Americans advanced relentlessly. Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Historians have long debated when Japan truly lost the war. Some point to Midway, others cite the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But many argue it began on April 18, 1942, the day 16 American bombers appeared in the sky over Tokyo. The day the myth of Japanese invincibility died, the day a single raid, lasting less than 10 minutes, set in motion a chain of decisions that would lead to the empire's downfall. The Japanese High Command's reaction to the raid, marked by panic, pride, and poor judgment, exposed fatal flaws in their strategy. Their overconfidence blinded them to the enemy's capabilities. Their shift toward homeland defense weakened their forward positions. Their rush to retaliate led to a poorly conceived operation at Midway, all because of one raid, one moment, one message: we are coming, and nothing will stop us.